This lockdown's been rough for a lot of people, especially those of us who live alone. A sort of solitary confinement. The only person I ever met who could isolate himself almost completely and keep his sanity was Jake Grayson. Jake was a bird watcher. Now, just let me say that a lot of bird watchers are a pretty strange bunch of people. I should know, I've been one since I was a teenager. Some birders concentrate on a single family, such as parakeets or hummingbirds. I became obsessed with the slate-backed solitaire, a bird I'd never seen. I knew only from this recording of its song, a haunting bell-like melody. The solitaire lives only in the cloud forests of Mexico and Central America. I wrote to Professor Davis at the University of Cornell, the Laboratory of Ornithology, the man who made the recording. He sent me a letter of introduction to Jake Grayson, a man who owned a large tract of virgin cloud forest. He also wrote that Jake was a difficult person to deal with, jealous of his privacy, who might well refuse my request for a visit. Determined, I rented a Jeep the next spring and drove down through the deserts of northern Mexico to the small town closest to Jake's land. I hired a young Mexican man, Jose, to take me to meet Jake. We left early the next morning and hiked up a steep path. About halfway up the mountain, we came to an Indian village. These were Jake's nearest neighbors. This part of the mountain had recently been logged, and the Indios were planting corn and beans in the clearings. After a short pause, we continued up an even steeper track into the edge of the cloud forest. Here, huge trees were hung with moss, orchids, and other air plants. Underneath, a ground cover of decaying vegetable matter, but almost no plants, as not enough sunlight got through. There was an eerie silence, all sound muffled by the fog. Suddenly, I was thoroughly chilled. We walked on for another hour or so until we came to an alpine-like meadow where I saw a small wooden cabin. Jose called out, Senor Jake, there's a gringo here to see you." The door opened and Jake came out, looking none too friendly. He was cradling a shotgun in his arms, and he said, "Who are you and what do you want?" I said, "My name is Jeremy Laws. I'm a birder, and I'm hoping to get some photos of the slate-backed solitaire. I have a letter for you from Professor Davis." Jake smiled and lowered the gun and said, "You look cold. Would you like a cup of coffee?" I said, "I'm frozen. A cup of coffee sounds like heaven." In the cabin, Jake read the letter. He didn't say anything for a while, and then he said, "I'll give you a week. Joselito will go back to town with you to help you bring up your gear." I had coffee with Jake every morning that week. He was a large man, somewhere between 60 and 70, with a full head of hair, a full beard. During the course of the week, I heard Jake's story. He was a Texan who'd come to Mexico as a young man to work in the oil fields. When Mexico nationalized the oil industry, he used the money he'd saved to buy this mountaintop. He'd planted an orchard of northern fruit trees, apples, peaches, and cherries. He traded the fruit with the Indios for corn and coffee beans. The only people Jake would allow on his land were scientists studying the cloud forest. He almost never left the property. I found Jake fascinating, a combination of affability and extreme reticence. Jake had only one serious source of worry: the loggers who wanted to cut on his land. He swore he would never allow them to damage his beloved cloud forest with its unique flora and fauna. When my week was up, I asked Jake if I could come back the next year, as I wanted to write a paper about the birds of the cloud forest. When he agreed, I said, "Can I bring you something?" He said, "New cast iron frying pan would be most welcome." That next year I stayed more than a month. By then I had enough data and photos for a dissertation. I did not visit Jake for a couple of years. The next time I came back, I was told Joselito had moved to Mexico City and no one had seen Jake for some time. I made my way to the cabin. The door was open. Everything inside was covered with a layer of dust. The shotgun was missing from the wall. I found no trace of Jake. His garden and orchard were overgrown and untended. I stayed only 2 days, and I never went back.